Everyone loves a delicious cinnamon roll. I'm here to show you how easy it is for you to make this sweet treat at home. I promise you'll be licking your plate. You'll start first by adding some dark brown sugar to a small bowl. Then you'll go ahead and add some softened butter. Next, you add the cinnamon. This basically is for the filling. I like to actually make a filling that's a paste to smear onto the cinnamon rolls, and I find that that's much easier. Usually you want the butter to be very soft. In this case, it's a little bit more firm than I would want. So I let it sit for a little bit and I come back and use a metal spoon instead. This made it easier to mix everything together, and eventually you got a nice smooth paste. This paste will be very easy to spread onto the cinnamon rolls later. I always make sure to gather all of that delicious filling, and then I actually cover it and set it aside for later. For the dry ingredients for the dough, you're going to first start by adding some all-purpose flour to the bowl of a stand mixer. The link in the description box below is definitely going to detail the recipe with all the exact measurements. Next, you add some white granulated sugar and some light brown sugar. Then you add some salt to the bowl, followed by adding some cinnamon. Next, I add a packet of instant yeast. Instant yeast actually has smaller granules compared to the active dry yeast, and it's these smaller granules that lets us mix it directly in with the rest of the dry ingredients without having to do extra work. Whatever you do, make sure the packet actually says the word instant on it. Once I finish mixing all the dry ingredients together, I cover it with some plastic wrap and then I set it aside. For the dough's wet ingredients, I first start by adding some sour cream to a bowl. This sour cream helps ensure that the dough has a very nice texture that is not dry. I then add some milk to the bowl, followed by the vanilla extract. I love to see the bubbling that happens. Don't ask me why that happens. I'm not a professional baker or a chemist. Next, I add some butter to the mixture. Try not to make as big a mess as me. I actually did soften this butter and set it out on the countertop, but not by much. And that's okay because we're going to be putting it into the microwave anyways. I go ahead and try and mix everything together just roughly. It doesn't matter that much because again, it's going to go into the microwave. My main purpose is to basically break up the butter into smaller chunks that will be more manageably broken down inside of the microwave. So I head on over to my microwave and I'm going to be popping it in for 3 separate 30-second increments. So after the first 30 seconds, I take it out and kind of stir it and mix it around. You can see that, it's still kind of chunky and that's okay. Then I go ahead and put it back into the microwave and I'm going to be basically microwaving it again for another 30 seconds. So after the second 30-second increment, I again take it out of the microwave and go ahead and mix it around with a spoon. You can tell that it's a little bit softer, but still some chunks are visible. You can try and break them up, or you can also just leave them. I'm basically going to put it in again for one last time for a final 30-second increment. So after this third 30 seconds in the microwave, I take it and go and set it out on top of the countertop. So now you can see it's a much smoother liquid after the microwave, just little chunks of butter, but with mixing, those kind of go away and dissolve. This liquid should be lukewarm temperature if you were to stick your finger inside of it. It should not be hot. Go ahead and add the wet to the dry ingredients and you're going to start to mix them together. This lukewarm temperature is what's going to help to activate the yeast. Go ahead and put your dough attachment onto your stand mixer and turn it on to very low initially, just to mix everything together to incorporate. I stir everything together first and then I go ahead and add the room temperature egg. Then I put the stand mixer onto a low setting of 2 and then allow the dough hook attachment to knead the dough for me. After kneading the dough for 4 to 6 minutes, I turn off the stand mixer because it looks like the dough has already started to form. This still is a pretty wet dough. If you touch it with your unfloured finger, it does stick a bit, but this is okay because I don't want a dry or crumbly dough in the end. I go ahead and scrape down the hook and all the sides just to gather my dough. Now, if I were to just lightly flour my finger and touch the dough, notice that it doesn't stick, and that's how I know this is the perfect consistency for the dough. So I go ahead and flour my work surface very generously, and I'm gonna go ahead and plop the dough onto the countertop. All the things we put inside of this dough is what's gonna make it amazingly soft and fluffy later. So you'll go ahead and very generously flour the top of the dough, and then also flour your hands as well. And then you're gonna basically go ahead and start kneading it. You notice it does stick to the countertop right now, but eventually it won't. Whenever you feel like it's sticking too much to either your hands or the countertop, just go ahead and sprinkle just a touch more flour. So when kneading dough, you're basically gonna push the dough away from you with the heels of your palm and then use your fingers to pull the dough back towards you. And you do this over and over again. It's actually very easy to knead this dough since we started it on the stand mixer. And like I said, if you ever notice that it's sticking to the counters too much, go ahead and just, dust some flour on the counter or on the dough. I'm by no means a professional baker. In fact, it's probably very obvious based on the way that I knead the dough. And I'm sure probably a professional baker would cringe as they watch the way I handle the dough, but that's okay. This video's not for them. I'm basically here to show everyone that basically anyone can make cinnamon rolls. It's actually a pretty easy process. After some time, you start to notice that the dough really doesn't stick much to the countertop when it's rolled, and if you touch it with your finger, it sort of bounces back. This is how you know it's basically ready. I basically knead it just a tiny bit more just to finish it off. This is actually one of my favorite recipes to share because I find that cinnamon rolls seem very intimidating, but they're really not. I mean, I'm not going to act like it's not 50 million steps because it literally is 50 million steps. But the thing is that they're very easy steps. Nothing's technically difficult or challenging about making cinnamon rolls. And really all it is just following directions. So long as you're patient and can follow directions, then you'll be able to get great cinnamon rolls. I tried to organize things very easily, both in this video and also in the written recipe that's linked below. I wanted to make it so it's very clear and easy to follow along either in written form or by video. I add some vegetable oil to a very large bowl and I take a paper towel and mix everything around. You can also use a brush or your hands. I just want to make sure that it's well greased so that the dough can come out very easily later. I take the dough and set it inside, and then I actually want to go ahead and cover it with some plastic wrap. I want this dough to stay moist. I'm going to set it aside in a warm place to allow it to rise. For me, this usually is on top of my oven because it's fairly warm over there. For me, it usually takes about 2 hours, and when I check on it, I see that it has doubled in size. You also can use the proofing button on your oven if you have that setting, but I've found that the dough tends to turn out better when I allow it to just more passively rise. So now I go ahead and flour my hands and the work surface. That's the dough there that's risen beautifully. I remove the plastic wrap and then go ahead and lightly punch the dough to release some of the air. I start to pull the dough away from the sides, and then I notice it very easily will drop down onto the countertop. That's because we oiled it very nicely before. As I prepare to assemble the cinnamon roll, I start by adding some flour to the top of the dough. I move it over and I basically get ready to start to roll it out with the rolling pin. I make sure that both of my hands are very well floured, and I actually go ahead and also make sure that the rolling pin is very well floured. I'm going to be making a rectangle. I make sure to have a measuring tape with me so that I can check it from time to time. The goal is to make a rectangle that is about 22 inches by 13 inches. When I check it here, I can see that on both sides it's still much too small, so I go ahead and continue to roll it out some more. This dough should be very easy to work with and stretch. You notice that it rolls very nicely. The addition of the brown sugar and cinnamon makes the dough a little bit darker than most, and this is also what makes it most delicious, so I love it. You may hear of some recipes that say, oh, you can make cinnamon rolls with just a few ingredients, and I'm here to say beware of those recipes. In my opinion, a simple 2 or 3 ingredient dough recipe is gonna leave you with some very dry, bland cinnamon rolls. So don't say I didn't warn you. I try to do the exact opposite with my recipe, and I make it a very rich dough, and I think that's why it's so soft and fluffy and delicious, and I love it. I try to make the edges have as sharp corners as I can to make the best rectangle possible, and then I go ahead and check again after rolling it out some more. This time when I use the measuring tape, I can see that I'm done. It's a little bit larger than 13 inches on this side. I check it in multiple places just to make sure that it's even. That's okay because I'm going to be rolling it. It actually is also a little bit larger than the 22 inches. I'm closer to 24, it seems, and that too is okay. So I uncover my cinnamon brown sugar filling and I go ahead and spread it all over the dough. It should spread very easily and nicely. I take the time to spread everything out and make sure that there aren't any gaps anywhere. After some time, the entire flat surface area is covered. I do this whole process with the back of a spoon pretty easily, but you can use any tool that you have. I always do leave a little bit of free space at the very top because I want this to remain free of any filling so that I can seal it and close it in the end. I start by rolling the dough very tightly at the very bottom corner. It's important that this part is done very tightly so that the roll will hold. I gradually will roll everything together, and you notice with time it rolls much easier towards the end. Once I get very close to the end, I actually take a small bowl with water and use my finger and dip it inside and add some water just to the edge there that I had left free. This will help hold the cinnamon roll together. So then I finish rolling everything together and I'm basically done. I would say that I did flour my work surface area a little too generously. You can see one side has a little too much flour. It'll be fine in the end, but it probably would be best to not put as much flour as I did. When I measure it out, I see that it's 24 inches. And again, that's a little bit bigger than the 22 inches I was striving for, but it still works. What it means is that in this case, I'm going to cut each of the pieces to about 2 inches. So I mark the center there, and I basically get a knife and every 2 inches do a little nick so I know where I want to cut them and how big they're going to be. Usually when I roll it out to 22 inches length for the rectangle, I end up cutting each piece into 1.75 or basically 1 3/4 inches. But again, in this case, they're actually going to be 2 inches long because I rolled it out into a rectangle that was 24 inches. A lot of people do cut off the ends because that's what's going to make it so your cinnamon rolls are all a regular size, but I actually still use and incorporate the ends because I don't mind if they're irregular sized and I don't want to waste any dough. I cut it with a piece of unscented dental floss, and this makes it very easy to be able to cut nicely without pressing them down. You can see when you cut into these cinnamon rolls how beautiful they end up looking. I end up making 12 pieces in total, and then I actually position to put them all into a baking dish. I prepare my baking dish by greasing the sides of it and then also putting a piece of parchment paper on the bottom. I load up all the cinnamon rolls inside and I position them so that they still have some space. Now, to be honest, after this whole process, I'm actually pretty tired and don't feel like doing any more. So I actually go ahead and cover the cinnamon rolls with some plastic wrap, and I put them to rest in the refrigerator overnight to finish tomorrow. You can choose to bake them now, but I usually cover them, let them rest, and put them in the refrigerator. The next morning, I take them out and I basically remove the plastic wrap, and then again, I'll need to let them set aside to basically have another rise. This is how they look right now. I'll set them aside into a warm place. So again, that can either be on top of your oven, or in this case, I am impatient, so I'm going to use the proof setting. So for the cream cheese frosting, I add some softened room temperature cream cheese to the stand mixer. I go ahead and add some butter and then some vanilla extract. Next, I add some fresh squeezed lemon juice. For the cream cheese, it's important that you use the block of cream cheese. Don't ever attempt to use any spreadable cream cheese. So once I have all the ingredients together, I add the paddle attachment to the stand mixer and then begin to cream everything together. I do this process fairly slowly. Once I notice it's forming a nice, consistent, creamy texture, I go ahead and add the powdered sugar. I do this very slowly as well because I don't want it to splatter anywhere. I only use 2.5 cups, and you definitely can use more. I just tend to prefer frosting that is not overly sweet, so this amount is perfect for me. I turn it off and then, of course, dust down the sides and also the stand mixer before I mix it together again, just briefly with the stand mixer. This frosting is ready in literally just minutes, and it's just that easy. I turn it off, set it aside, and then get ready to make the cinnamon rolls. These are how the cinnamon rolls look after the final proofing. I didn't bake them, I just let them sit in a warm place. Now I will go ahead and bake these cinnamon rolls in an oven that had been preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Once I take them out, you can see they look beautiful here. You always want to check the center to make sure that they're done. I spread some icing on the cinnamon rolls pretty immediately because I actually do want it to melt and drip down to all the sides. But while I'm spreading it, I do reserve some of the icing for later because, I love this icing. This is about how much frosting I usually reserve for later. If you wanted to keep it, you can always put it in a Ziploc bag and stick it in the freezer. Once it's frosted, you do have to let it sit for a bit to be able to cool, and then you'll have these amazing, delicious cinnamon rolls. It literally will be the most delicious thing you've ever tasted. I really love making these. I think that if you follow the directions, you'll notice that it's actually fairly simple and straightforward, not intimidating at all. I do think that they keep very well. Once you've allowed them to cool completely, you're able to cut into them. And I actually go ahead and wrap each cinnamon roll individually in a plastic wrap, and then I put those into a freezer bag and I save them in the freezer for later. And when you're ready for them, it's very easy. You just take a single roll out, go ahead and set it in your refrigerator the day before you want to eat it. And when you want to have it, it's just as simple as putting it in the microwave for about 30 seconds or less, and it tastes amazing, just like the very first day. Thanks again for watching. Check out all of our cooking videos here on YouTube.